Why, hello, Corporal. Where did you get those two yellow stripes from on your arm? Why, sir, I have been promoted for gallantry on the battlefield by picking up an orphan flag that had been run over by 1,000 fellows, and when I picked it up, I did so because I thought it was pretty and I wanted to have me a shirt made out of it. I could have picked up 40 had I known that, said Sloane. So could I, but I knew that the stragglers would pick them up. Reader mine, the above dialogue is true in every particular. As long as I was in action, fighting for my country, there was no chance for promotion. But as soon as I fell out of ranks and picked up a forsaken and deserted flag, I was promoted for it. I felt sorter cheap when complimented for gallantry, and the high honor of fourth corporal was conferred upon me. I felt that those brave and noble fellows who had kept on in the charge were more entitled to the honor than I was, for when the ball struck me on the ankle and heel, I did not go any further. And had I only known that picking up flags entitled me to promotion, and that every flag picked up would raise me one notch higher, I would have quit fighting and gone to picking up flags, and by that means I would have soon been President of the Confederate States of America. But honors now begin to cluster around my brow. This is the laurel and ivy that is entwined around the noble brows of victorious and renowned generals. I honestly earned the exalted honor of fourth corporal by picking up a Yankee battle flag on the 22nd day of July at Atlanta, 28th of July at Atlanta. Another battle was fought by General Stephen D. Lee and Stuart's Corps on the 28th day of July. I was not in it, neither was our corps, but from what I afterwards learned, the Yankees got the best of the engagement, but our troops continued fortifying Atlanta. No other battles were ever fought at this place. I visit Montgomery. Our wounded were being sent back to Montgomery. My name was put on the wounded list. We were placed in a boxcar and whirling down to West Point, where we changed cars for Montgomery. The cars drew up at the depot at Montgomery, and we were directed to go to the hospital. When we got off the cars, little huckster stands were everywhere. Apples, oranges, peaches, watermelons, everything. I know that I never saw a greater display of eatables in my whole life. I was particularly attracted toward an old lady's stand. She had bread, fish, and hard-boiled eggs. The eggs were what I was hungry for. Says I, "Madam, how do you sell your eggs?" "2 for $1, she said. "How much is your fish worth?" "A piece of bread and a piece of fish for $1. "Well, madam, put out your fish and eggs." The fish were hot and done to a crisp, actually frying in my mouth, crackling and singing as I bit off a bite. It was good, I tell you. The eggs were a little over half done. I soon demolished both, and it was only an appetizer. I invested a couple of dollars more, and thought that maybe I could make out till supper time. As I turned around, a smiling, one-legged man asked me if I wouldn't like to have a drink. Now, if there was anything that I wanted at that time, it was a drink. "How do you sell it?" says I. $1 a drink," said he. "Pour me out a drink." It was a tin cap box. I thought that I knew the old fellow, and he kept looking at me as if he knew me. Finally, he said to me, "It seems that I ought to know you." I told him that I reckon he did, as I had been there. "Ain't your name Sam?" said he. "That is what my mother called me." Well, after shaking hands, it suddenly flashed upon me who the old fellow was. I knew him well. He told me that he belonged to Captain Ed, O'Neill's company, 2nd Tennessee Regiment, General William B. Bates' Corps, and that his leg had been shot off at the first battle of Manassas. and at that time he was selling cheap whiskey and tobacco for a living at Montgomery, Alabama. I tossed off a cat box full and paid him $1. It staggered me, and I said, "That is raw whiskey." "Yes," said he, "all my cooked whiskey is out. If this is not quite cooked, it is as hot as fire anyhow, and burns like red-hot lava, and the whole dose seems to have got lodged in my windpipe. I might have tasted it, but don't think that I did. All I can remember now is a dim recollection of a nasty, greasy, burning something going down my throat and chest, and smelling, as I remember at this day, like a decoction of red pepper tea, flavored with coal oil, turpentine, and tobacco juice. The hospital. I went to the hospital that evening, saw it, and was satisfied with hospital life. I did not wish to be called a hospital rat. I had no idea of taking stock and making my headquarters at this place. Everything seemed clean and nice enough, but the smell? Ye gods! I stayed there for supper. The bill of fare was a thin slice of light bread and a plate of soup, already dished out and placed at every plate. I ate it, but it only made me hungry. At 9 o'clock I had to go to bed, and all the lights were put out. Every man had a little bunk to himself. I don't know whether I slept or not, but I have a dim recollection of sawing gourds and jumping up several times to keep some poor wretch from strangling. He was only snoring. I heard rats filing away at night and thought that burglars were trying to get in. My dreams were not pleasant if I went to sleep at all. I had not slept off of the ground or in a house in 3 years. It was something new to me, and I could not sleep, for the room was so dark that had I got up, I could not have found my way out. I laid there, I do not know how long, but I heard a rooster crow, and a dim twilight began to glimmer in the room, and even footsteps were audible in the rooms below. I got sleepy then, and went off in a doze. I had a beautiful dream, dreamed that I was in heaven, or rather that a pair of stairs with richly carved balusters and wings, and golden steps overlaid with silk and golden-colored carpeting, came down from heaven to my room, and 2 beautiful damsels kept peeping, and laughing, and making faces at me from the first platform of these steps, and every now and then they would bring out their golden harps and sing me a sweet and happy song. Others were constantly passing, but always going the same way. They looked like so many schoolgirls, all dressed in shining garments. 2 or 3 times the 2 beautiful girls would go up the stairs and return, bringing fruits and vegetables that shined like pure gold. I knew that I never had seen 2 more beautiful beings on earth. The steps began to lengthen out and seemed to be all around me. They seemed to shine a halo of glory all about. The 2 ladies came closer and closer, passing around, having a beautiful wreath of flowers in each hand, and gracefully throwing them backward and forward as they laughed and danced around me. Finally, one stopped and knelt down over me and whispered something in my ear. I threw up my arms to clasp the beautiful vision to my bosom, when I felt my arm grabbed and, "Damn ye, I wish you would keep your damn arm off my wound. You hurt me," came from the soldier in the next bunk. The sun was shining full in my face. I got up and went down to breakfast. The bill of fare was much better for breakfast than it had been for supper. In fact, it was what is called a Jarvis breakfast. After breakfast, I took a ramble around the city. It was a nice place, and merchandise and other business was being carried on as if there was no war. Hotels were doing a thriving business. Steamboats were at the wharf, whistling and playing their calliopes. I remember the one I heard was playing away down on the Suwannee River. To me, it seemed that everybody was smiling and happy and prosperous. The Capitol. I went to the Capitol, and it is a fine building overlooking the city. When I got there, I acted just like everybody that ever visited a fine building. They wanted to go on top and look at the landscape. That is what they all say. Now, I always wanted to go on top, but I never yet thought of landscape. What I always wanted to see was how far I could look, and that is about all that any of them wants. It's mighty nice to go up on a high place with your sweetheart and hear her say, "Lie, ain't it Beautiful? Now, please don't go there," and how you walk up pretty close to the edge and spit over, to show what a brave man you are. It's bully, I tell you. Well, I wanted to go to the top of the Capitol. I wanted to go up in the cupola. Now, there was an iron ladder running up across an empty space, and you could see 200 feet below from this cupola or dome on top. The ladder was about 10 feet long, spanning the dome. It was very easy to go up because I was looking up all the time, and I was soon on top of the building. I saw how far I could see, and saw the Alabama River winding and turning until it seemed no larger than a silver thread. Well, I am very poor at describing and going into ecstasies over fancies. I want some abler pen to describe the scene. I was not thinking about the scene or the landscape. I was thinking how I was going to get down that ladder again. I would come to that iron ladder and peep over, and think if I fell, how far would I have to fall? The more I thought about going down that ladder, the more I didn't feel like going down. Well, I felt that I had rather die than go down that ladder. I'm honest in this. I felt like jumping off and committing suicide rather than go down that ladder. I crossed right over the frightful chasm, but when forbearance ceased to be a virtue, I tremblingly put my foot on the first rung, then grabbed the top of the two projections. There I remained, I don't know how long, but after a while I reached down with one foot and touched the next rung. After getting that foot firmly placed, I ventured to risk the other foot. It was thus for several backward steps until I came to see down, away down, down below me, and my head got giddy. The world seemed to be turning round and round. A fellow at the bottom hallooed, look up, mister, look up." I was not a foot from the upper floor. As soon as I looked at the floor, everything got steady. I kept my eyes fixed on the top of the building, and soon made the landing on terra firma. I have never liked high places since. I never could bear to go upstairs in a house. I went to the Capitol at Nashville last winter, and McAndrews wanted me to go up in the cupola with him. He went and paid a quarter for the privilege. I stayed, and, well, if I could estimate its value by dollars, I would say $250 million is what I made by staying down. A.M. arrested. The next day, while the ferry boat was crossing the river, I asked the ferryman to let me ride over. I was halted by a soldier who knowed his business. "Your pass, sir." "Well, I have no pass." "Well, sir, I will have to arrest you and take you before the provost marshal." "Very well, sir. I will go with you to the provost or anywhere else." I appear before the provost marshal. "What command do you belong to, sir?" "Well, sir, I belong to Company Aytch, 1st Tennessee Regiment. I am a wounded man sent to the hospital." "Well, sir, that's too thin. Why did you not get a pass?" "I did not think one was required." "Give me your name, sir." I gave my name. "Sergeant, take this name to the hospital and ask if such name is registered on their books." I told him that I knew it was not, The sergeant returns and reports no such name when he remarks, "You have to go to the guardhouse." Says I, "Colonel," I knew his rank was that of captain, "if you send me to the guardhouse, you will do me a great wrong. Here is where I was wounded." I pulled off my shoe and began to unbandage. "Well, sir, I don't want to look at your foot, and I have no patience with you. Take him to the guardhouse." Turning back, I said, "Sir, you are clothed with a little brief authority, and appear to be presuming pretty heavy on that authority. But, sir, well, I have forgotten what I did say." The sergeant took me by the arm and said, "Come, come, sir, I have my orders." As I was going up the street, I met Captain Dave Buckner and told him all the circumstances of my arrest as briefly as I could. He said, "Sergeant, bring him back with me to the provost marshal's office." They were as mad as wet hens. Their faces were burning, and I could see their jugular veins go thump, thump, thump. I don't know what Captain Buckner said to them. All I heard were the words, "otherwise insulted me," but I was liberated and was glad of it. Those girls. I then went back to the river and gave a fellow $2 to row me over the ferry. I was in no particular hurry and limped along at my leisure until about nightfall, when I came to a nice, cozy-looking farmhouse and asked to stay all night. I was made very welcome indeed. There were 2 very pretty girls here, and I could have loved either were t'other dear charmer away. But I fell in love with both of them, and thereby overdid the thing. This was by a dim firelight. The next day was Sunday, and we all went to church in the country. We went in an old rockaway carriage. I remember that the preacher used the words, "Oh, God," 19 times in his prayer. I had made up my mind which one of the girls I would marry. Now, don't get mad, fair reader mine. I was all gallantry and smiles, and when we arrived at home, I jumped out and took hold the hand of a fair charmer to help her out. She put her foot out, and, well, I came very near telling she tramped on a cat. The cat squalled, "The talisman." But then, you know, reader, that I was engaged to Jenny, and I had a talisman in my pocket Bible in the way of a love letter against the charms of other beautiful and interesting young ladies. Uncle Jimmy Reeves had been to Maury County, and on returning to Atlanta, found out that I was wounded and in the hospital at Montgomery, and brought the letter to me. And as I am married now, I don't mind telling you what was in the letter if you won't laugh at me. You see, Jenny was my sweetheart, and here is my sweetheart's letter. My dear Sam, I write to tell you that I love you yet, and you alone, and day by day I love you more, and pray every night and morning for your safe return home again. My greatest grief is that we heard you were wounded and in the hospital, and I cannot be with you to nurse you. We heard of the death of many noble and brave men at Atlanta, and the death of Captain Carthel, Cousin Mary's husband. It was sent by Captain January. He belonged to the 12th Tennessee, of which Colonel Watkins was lieutenant colonel. The weather is very beautiful here, and the flowers in the garden are in full bloom, and the apples are getting ripe. I have gathered a small bouquet, which I will put in the letter. I also send by Uncle Jimmy a tobacco bag, and a watch guard made out of horsehair and a woolen hood, knit with my own hands with love and best respects. We heard that you had captured a flag at Atlanta and were promoted for it to corporal. Is that some high office? I know you will be a general yet, because I always hear of your being in every battle, and always the foremost man in the attack. Sam, please take care of yourself for my sake, and don't let the Yankees kill you. Well, goodbye, darling. I will ever pray for God's richest and choicest blessings upon you. Be sure and write a long, long letter, I don't care how long, to your loving and sincere Jenny, the brave captain. When I got back to the Alabama River, opposite Montgomery, the ferry boat was on the other shore. A steamboat had just pulled out of its moorings and crossed over to where I was, and began to take on wood. I went on board and told the captain, who was a clever and good man, that I would like to take a trip with him to Mobile and back, and that I was a wounded soldier from the hospital. He told me, "All right, come along, and I will foot expenses." It was about sunset, but along the line of the distant horizon we could see the dark and heavy clouds begin to boil up in thick and ominous columns. The lightning was darting to and fro like lurid sheets of fire, and the storm seemed to be gathering. We could hear the storm king in his chariot in the clouds, rumbling as he came, but a dead lull was seen and felt in the air and in nature. Everything was in a holy hush, except the hoarse belchings of the engines, the sizzling and frying of the boilers, and the work of the machinery on the lower deck. At last, the storm burst upon us in all its fury. It was a tornado, and the women and children began to scream and pray, the mate to curse and swear. I was standing by the captain on the main upper deck, as he was trying to direct the pilot how to steer the boat through that awful storm, when we heard the alarm bell ring out and the hoarse cry of "Fire! Fire! Fire!" Men were running toward the fire with buckets, and the hose began throwing water on the flames. Men, women, and children were jumping in the water, and the captain used every effort to quiet the panic and to land his boat with its passengers. But the storm and fire were too much, and down the vessel sank to rise no more. Many had been saved in the lifeboat, and many were drowned. I jumped overboard, and the last thing I saw was the noble and brave captain still ringing the bell as the vessel went down. He went down amid the flames to fill a watery grave. The water was full of struggling and dying people for miles. I did not go to Mobile. How I get back to Atlanta? When I got to Montgomery, the cars said, "Toot, toot," and I raised the hue and cry and followed in pursuit. Kind friends, I fear that I have wearied you with my visit to Montgomery, but I am going back to camp now, and will not leave it again until our banner is furled, never to be again unfurled. I, you remember, was without a pass, and did not wish to be carried a second time before that good, brave, and just provost marshal, and something told me not to go to the hospital. I found out when the cars would leave, and thought that I would get on them and go back without any trouble. I got on the cars, but was hustled off mighty quick because I had no pass. A train of boxcars was about leaving for West Point, and I took a seat on top of one of them and was again hustled off. But I had determined to go, and as the engine began to puff and tug and pull, I slipped in between two boxcars, sitting on one part of one and putting my feet on the other, and rode this way until I got to West Point. The conductor discovered me and had put me off several times before I got to West Point, but I would jump on again as soon as the car started. When I got to West Point, a train of cars started off, and I ran, trying to get on, when Captain Peebles reached out his hand and pulled me in, and I arrived safe and sound at Atlanta. On my way back to Atlanta, I got with Dowa Khan and Billy March. Billy March had been shot through the underjaw by a mini ball at the Octagon House, but by proper attention and nursing he had recovered. Connor Aiken was killed at the Octagon House, and Dow wounded. When we got back to the regiment, then stationed near a fine concrete house where Shepard and I would sleep every night, nearly right on our works, we found two 32-pound Parrott guns stationed in our immediate front and throwing shells away over our heads into the city of Atlanta. We had just begun to tell all the boys howdy when I saw Watkins fall. A fragment of shell had struck him on his backbone, and he was carried back wounded and bleeding. We could see the smoke boil up, and it would be nearly a minute before we would hear the report of the cannon, and then, a few moments after, we would hear the scream of the shell as it went on to Atlanta. We used to count from the time we would see the smoke boil up until we would hear the noise, and some fellow would call out, "Look out, boys! The United States is sending iron over into the Southern Confederacy. Let's send a little lead back to the United States." And we would blaze away with our Enfield and Whitworth guns, and every time we would fire, we would silence those Parrott guns. This kind of fun was carried on for 46 days. Death of Tom Tuck's rooster. Atlanta was a great place to fight chickens. I had heard much said about cockpits and cockfights, but had never seen such a thing. Away over the hill, outside of the range of Thomas's 30-pound Parrott guns with which he was trying to burn up Atlanta, the boys had fixed up a cockpit. It was fixed exactly like a circus ring, and seats and benches were arranged for the spectators. Well, I went to the cockfight one day. A great many roosters were to be pitted that day, and each one was trimmed and gaffed. A gaff is a long, keen piece of steel, as sharp as a needle, that is fitted over the spurs. Well, I looked on at the fun. Tom Tuck's rooster was named Southern Confederacy, but this was abbreviated to Confed, and as a pet name, they called him Fed. Well, Fed was a trained rooster, and would clean up a Bigfoot rooster as soon as he was put in the pit. But Tom always gave Fed every advantage. One day, a green-looking country hunk came in with a rooster that he wanted to pit against Fed. He looked like a common rail splitter. The money was soon made up, and the stakes placed in proper hands. The gaffs were fitted, the roosters were placed in the pit, and held until both were sufficiently mad to fight, when they were turned loose, and each struck at the same time. I looked, and poor Fed was dead. The other rooster had popped both gaffs through his head. He was a dead rooster, yea, a dead cock in the pit. Tom went and picked up his rooster and said, "Poor Fed, I loved you. You used to crow every morning at daylight to wake me up. I have carried you a long time, but alas, alas, poor Fed, your days are numbered, and those who fight will sometimes be slain. Now, friends, conscripts, countrymen, if you have any tears to shed, prepare to shed them now. I will not bury Fed. The evil that roosters do lives after them, but the good is often interred with their bones. So let it not be with Confederacy. Confed left no will, but I will pick him, and fry him, and dip my biscuit in his gravy. Poor Fed, Confed, Confederacy, I place one hand on my heart and one on my head, regretting that I have another to place on my stomach, and whisper, softly whisper, in the most doleful accents, goodbye, farewell, a long farewell. Not a laugh was heard, not even a joke. As the dead rooster in the camp kettle they hurried, for Tom had lost $10 and was broke, in the cockpit where Confed was buried. They cooked him slowly in the middle of the day, as the frying pan they were solemnly turning. The hungry fellows looking at him as he lay, with one side raw, the other burning. Some surplus feathers covered his breast. Not in a shroud, but in a tiara they soused him. He lay like a picked chicken taking his rest while the rebel boys danced and cursed around him. Not a few or short were the cuss words they said, yet they spoke many words of sorrow as they steadfastly gazed on the face of the dead and thought, "What'll we do for chicken tomorrow?" Lightly they'll talk of the Southern Confederacy that's gone, and o'er his empty carcass upbraid him. But nothing he'll reck if they let him sleep on in the place where they have laid him. Sadly and slowly they laid him down from the field of fame fresh and gory. They ate off his flesh and threw away his bones, and then left them alone in their glory. When cut, slash, bang, to bang, and here comes a dash of Yankee cavalry right in the midst of the camp, under whip and spur, yelling like a band of wild Comanches, and bearing right down on the few mourners around the dead body of Confed. After making this bold dash, they about-faced and were soon out of sight. There was no harm done, but, alas, that cooked chicken was gone. Poor Confederacy, to what a sad end you have come. Just to think that but a few short hours ago you were a proud rooster, was cock of the walk, and was considered invincible. But, alas, you have sunk so low as to become food for Federals. Requiescat in pace, you can crow no more. That concludes the 24th part of the story. Thank you very much for listening. Please subscribe for more episodes and leave a comment.